So let's gear shift from the ad-supported streaming thing into the local realm of such. I think if we just, you can, when you're done, you can.
Yeah, come.
One click. Yeah, come on in, Keith, please. That's all. That's all right. Empty seats. So,
can I sit or like you
yeah,
have to
you
stand
can
up
sit.
here?
You can stand. You can do whatever you want. Stand in your head for all I care. But one of the exclamation points that we really wanted to put in the afternoon, as hinted at earlier, is okay. Streaming's a thing. It's a big deal. It's upsetting a lot of apple carts, especially from linear television heritage perspectives. Certainly in the ad sales realm and stuff. And arguably there have been some things that have been, shall we say, bolted on to accommodate for such, like rep firms and streaming services and all those kinds of things, adding on, if you will, linear buy first and then adding on other stuff. But we all know that that's probably just a stopgap to something much more sophisticated and integrated. But where it really gets challenging is in the realm of local, right? So as Alan's going to hint at, a report that the two of us were part of with TV Rev and some other conversations, I'm not sure that this has really been figured out yet, right? So local plus streaming equals, I think right now the answer is a question mark. I think there have been some interesting moves, some interesting evolutions, and or some avoidance of the real issues and challenges and stuff. So I don't think anybody disagrees that streaming and ad-supported streaming is not a gigantic opportunity and is still early enough where opportunities are sort of yet to be sort of fully defined and or taken advantage of. But I think in the local, it's probably a lot more greenfield, and that was sort of the proposition for this panel. So now, Alan, as moderator, please pick up the baton and run with it. Thank you.
Okay, good. So now you don't have to listen to my opinions on stuff. We have 5 smart people here, and I'm gonna go down from the end towards me. So Peter, if you start, just tell everybody what your name is and why they should care about what you have to say. So and we need a mic for Peter. Actually, I'll give you. I can speak loudly. You take my mic.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Peter Jones. I head up all the local sales for Premion, partnered with my friend over here at Gray and with Tegna, based out of Tampa, Florida, right across the state.
And Keith Kisman, president at Locality Streaming. The other side of Ann Heiler, who was on stage earlier today. On the broadcast side, we bring convergence to local.
Erin Overstreet.
You have to hit the button, yeah.
Erin Overstreet, I'm the vice president of digital sales for Gray Television. I've been with Gray for 15 years and have kind of watched the evolution of our local sales teams going from selling linear to now they're really talking digital first in a lot of cases, and they're confused as they're doing it, so making sure they do a better job in those conversations.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jonathan Musio. I'm the VP of Business Development with Compos, and I've been there for about 8 months or so, but I have been working for the past 12 years working with tech-enabled digital services providers that partner with local media companies and advertising agencies, and trying to enable these guys to go out there and sell more digital, and streaming obviously being one of them.
Hi, I'm Jeff Haley. I'm on the corporate development team at Cox Media Group. We're the folks who've launched Neighborhood TV, which is an original linear streaming news product on fast channels.
Okay, so what we're going to go through this a little bit. We're going to talk first about sort of how local is doing this. Wow, that's pretty loud. How local is going to do distribution on streaming, is working to do distribution via streaming. I'm sorry. Oh, well, thank you, Tim. So the aforementioned report that Tim, myself, and Evan Shapiro had all collaborated on, it is available for free on the TV Rev website. And because I figured out how to do this, there is a QR code up there that you can just sort of, seeing this technology in action, scan and get. Otherwise, if you just go to tvrev.com, I believe there's a banner. If you go to the reports page, it's there. It's pretty easy to find. But like I said, it is free. And I also want to call out, we've got a number of the sponsors of the report are here. We have the CCR Media guys in the back there. Kristen Winnick was here from Mad Hive. And then the other sponsors who I'll give credit to are Amagi and Cadent, and last but not least, Premion. So Thank them all very much, and you can download this. Anyway, as I was saying, it's a very comprehensive. It's a big report. It's about 66 some odd pages. It's got a whole consumer survey that we did with Evan and Publishers Clearinghouse that had 60,000 respondents on the report. So it's a pretty interesting for everybody, I think, in this room. But anyway, back to reality here. We're going to talk about how distribution is being handled, streaming distribution on local, and then advertising on streaming on local. So the first thing to start off with distribution, there's been a number of ways that local broadcasters have tried to bring their programming onto streaming. So the first one, and I'll throw this at you, Aaron, how you see it working, is they've been partnering with the VMVPDs, with with Hulu Live TV and YouTube TV and whatnot. Like, how does that, how has that played out? Has Gray done any stuff, with that? Like, what's, how has that worked out? And what are some of the pros, cons, and whatnot of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we're partnering with them, you kind of follow their rules. When you're developing your own apps, you have more control over the content, over the streams. So, it's a little bit of meeting people where they're at, and they're a little bit of everywhere right now.
Right. And do you get retrans fees from that?
On those, yes. So, I mean, it's a complicated situation there.
Yes, yeah. Well, do you want to talk about what that, because it is interesting what's going on now. Do you want to?
I mean, I think that you've got to continue, like I said, to meet people where they're at. There are some fees coming in for certain platforms, and then it's kind of individual in each platform and the negotiations you've got.
Gotcha. Anyone else have any thoughts on the VMVPD? I'll move on. The other thing that's been happening is that they've been launching their own apps. So a number of stations have tried to launch their own apps, and a lot of cable groups. So you guys have neighborhood TV. How's that worked out? And what are some of the challenges and all that on that?
It's worked out really well. We're in our two of our larger markets are Atlanta and Charlotte. We've launched there. We're doing about 100 million impressions a month in those markets. We're in about 70 neighborhoods in Atlanta, 30 in Charlotte. The time spent with the content is very high, upwards of 20 plus minutes. So we're really excited about what this does. We also think the content itself has a different flavor that you don't see in the average amount of the news we produce daily in these stations. So we'll produce about 6.5 hours of original news programming in Charlotte and Atlanta. And this is complementary programming to that. So when you think about the FAST environment, where we're leaving the environment of syndicated programming and repeats and all the rest, original content on a FAST platform makes a lot of sense for us.
Gotcha.
Yeah, just to add to that, we're partners with the neighborhood, and when you really think about that local nature of the content, that's the power, which is the authenticity of the content, reaching that audience, and to your point, just where they are. So it really brings that all together really nicely as you look at those very specific geographies and cities. And we talk about relevant ads, that's what that experience is all about when you think about local and streaming.
Yeah, Pete, you.
Yeah, no, I think Jeff hit the nail on the head. Sorry, let me think of how I want to phrase this. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Okay, you can't just have the same content and distribute it to every single platform, every single service. It's going to have to change. The space is too dynamic. The consumers are too different. You have different generations you're trying to target. So I think that's as broadcasters, I think like doing the neighborhood thing or doing something different, original content that may be available on your O&O apps versus not just having your normal news feed is we definitely have to change the product and to adopt to the different distributions that are methods that are out there.
Right. So you work with a station group as well. Like, do you guys have some advantage in sort of launching your own stuff? I mean, it seems that they've struggled, that there's been some struggles, and yet you have things like Sinclair trying to put Stir up there. Like, does that is there an advantage to that, or is that like a good way to look at how to put stuff up on TV, like to bring streaming onto TV?
I'm sorry, speaking objectively here, I think we got to try different things. I mean, we're still the wild, wild west. We're in the infancy stages of streaming right now. I mean, we're still trying to figure it out. I mean, even the big tech companies don't have it figured out. So absolutely, I think let's try out different streaming services, launch fast platforms, launch your own apps, see what gains traction, try different content, different distribution methods. Absolutely.
Good, good.
Yeah, I was going to say, across Sinclair, we developed News On, right, as a way to kind of aggregate and distribute, disseminate high-quality inventory, within an app, right? And that's something that's being sold and represented, and it's a big differentiator across the Sinclair organizational footprint, not just as a standalone platform, but also we're making sure that we're baking that app, that pub into every single one of the campaigns that we're executing from a programmatic standpoint. And also it gives us the ability to establish relationships with additional agencies outside of Sinclair. So it's not just necessarily meant for Sinclair. We're looking to monetize that through other channels, methods, different varieties.
Gotcha. So are there any real in other words, you guys are trying to sort of stand stuff up, even the sort of the dynamics of it, like having to sort of update things all the time. Does that make it difficult for local stations to just say, hey, I'm gonna launch my own app versus sort of going with a bigger service? Or is it the sort of thing that, to Peter's point, we don't know yet? It could be, you could make it work as its freestanding app.
I'll share a quick story. So I have a friend of the family whose granddaughter, 22-year-old, came out of University of Texas, is a reporter for a small station in Waco, Texas. She has more followers on YouTube with just doing iPhone video footage than the anchor who sits behind the desk. So I think, that's eye-opening right there. Okay, you got to make changes. You're going to have to adopt differently. You're going to have different content that you're going to put on TikTok, that you're going to put on YouTube, than what you're going to put on your O&O app.
Yeah. That's interesting. So Keith.
Just to add to that, I think it's a really important point. You can't just cut and paste. And as we're all looking at transformation, change is hard. And that's the difficult part of transforming, and is who the decision makers, what's that investment in that digital strategy and the curation of the right content to put on digital. And that's a sea change for any programmer, but local as well.
Right. So the other place we're seeing a lot of the local stations starting to kind of move is onto the fast services. So, and that's mostly happening with news, because news is sort of a big thing. But I'll ask you, what are some of the challenges, because you sort of stood this up, of sort of taking news, which is for most local stations is 2 half-hour shows a day, and turning it into a 24-hour, how do you do that?
We actually launched 3 streams per news station. Right. So there's a weather stream, there's a specific, what we call our 24/7 stream, which is more of a news repeat, and then there's a product called a Now stream, which has more of what you would typically see over the air with us. All of them are different. Neighborhood TV sits inside of the Now and 24/7 streams. About 15% of the day is taken up with neighborhood TV. The rest is taken up with live news and repeats, and some lifestyle programming, but less and less. I think you'll see more innovation from CMG. We have other platforms and other programs and other segments that are in the works. This is as all these guys have said, this is sort of the Wild West. But you do have to go everywhere the consumer is. The idea of things being a walled garden or controlling where your ratings points are going to go on one distribution channel versus the other, I just don't think that's going to work anymore.
Right. Aaron, Gray is a pretty sizable group. Do you get some economies of scale that way? As you're looking, can you sort of use the power of the station group to kind of make what you're doing on various, bring the local stations to fast easier?
Yeah, we're in 113 markets, and we're looking at what's working, and then you replicate it, and you do more of it in other markets. I think, with some of the things that we have with Investigate TV, with Local News Live, you can take that and you can spread that across the markets. There's a lot of regionalization that happens, too, that's really helpful. But people are looking for local content still, and so, what works in one market isn't necessarily going to be what works in another. And like Peter said, it's a lot of testing. Trying things out, failing fast, moving on, or if it's working, how do you make it bigger?
Right. Jonathan, have you had you guys work with Sinclair? What are you seeing in that regard? Like, is it just are there some things there's some certain Sinclair stations you're doing that you're able to go, okay, this works, let's do this? Is it all based around Stir? Like, how are you guys looking at that?
So across Sinclair, right, there's some markets that we have no news station, right? It's a CW station, right? So we're trying to figure out creative ways to host unique content across some of those different stations that lack news, right? And to Aaron's point, everybody's craving local content, right? So I think that there's something that is a huge initiative for us is how can we not just kind of produce this content, distribute it, be something that's resonating, kind of dynamic to the different region market, instead just replicating and trying to throw gas on it if it's something that's working. But honestly, with Sinclair, one thing that we do see is the ability to play and do something different, and if it's not working, like you said.
Yeah, on that point, we're talking about just scale and fragmentation, and I think what we saw previously just on what that distribution really and that streaming engagement looks like, there needs to be investment in how do you promote this content. There's 1,000 different fast channels. OEMs are certainly leading with aggregating those. It's how do you promote that? How do you invest in marketing? Advertising works. And I think as the broadcast industry looks at this, needs to look at promo conversion. How do you use that right targeting to promote the news to create that scale? Because that's where the future is, and need to build towards that.
Right. So, go on, Pete.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think I mentioned earlier, the big tech companies don't have it figured out. I think the broadcast companies are in the best position to own their local markets. They have the brands in the market, they have the feet on the street, they have the content creation in the local market, and I think that will win, especially against the big tech companies that aren't represented in those markets.
Right. So one of the questions, most markets have at least three local stations. Is there room on streaming for three, local broadcast stations, three local news outlets? One of the things we hear as sort of from people when we did the report was they look at what Charter Spectrum has done. They have these 24/7 cable news networks in different markets, and that's a really good, that's sort of a good model for this. But the question is there room for three of those in every market? I mean, maybe there is, but what do you think?
I think yes, definitely in some markets. I think you have people have this massive desire for content. I always joke that we always stream and we always want something new. That's why when we look at the stats, there's a lot of churn when it comes to subscription services. I mean, we were desperate during the pandemic that Tiger King was #1 on Netflix for a whole month. And I know you guys watched it, didn't you? Okay, but I think not just I'm not sure about a 24-hour streaming network. I'm not sure about that, but because there's so many different ways that we collect our news now. So it may be from TikTok. It may be from I'm not on TikTok, by the way, but nothing against TikTok if there's anyone in here from TikTok. But I think that we will have to have the content or the distribution and find out how people want to get their news or get their content and then deliver it that way based on the market. I think every market's going to be different. It's going to be dynamic.
Yeah. Anyone else have a thought on that?
I think that, the leaders will rise to the top and the rest will weed themselves out eventually, just like with anything. I think the fast channels are going to be the same way.
Yeah.
I think Peter said something really interesting is that you've got so many different sources of news, and a lot of those aren't live video news. People are getting sources of news off of their phones, off of their laptops, off of their iPads, off of their word of mouth. Some people actually pick up hard paper still. So you've got an average American will have about 4 to 5 different sources of news. So what you produce every day has to be somewhat different and complementary and additive to that. You talk about how many markets could you have a News 12 cable was your question. Well, News 12 cable actually runs in the New York market. It runs in about 5 different systems. So there's a local cable in that one market to 14 million people times 5. When we first outlined neighborhood TV for Atlanta, we figured there would be 6 neighborhood TVs inside of just the Atlanta market. So there's lots of room for creating news and content that is stuff people care about. Most of it's within 6 miles of their home.
Right. So, go
I mean, why not? We're on a panel here. We haven't mentioned AI yet, so I feel like we're overdue for that. But will AI make it easier for us to break up the content or to distribute it to different platforms or services that people can consume?
Right. No, that was definitely something that we heard in the report from a number of people. This notion that you can do both hyper local and regional at the same time. So in other words, within the same show, you could have a piece of content that was sort of for all of California. Maybe it's a thing about the California State House, whatever, and at the same time have something very specific to the San Fernando Valley, depending on who it was. That geo-targeting would allow you to do a lot more of that, which is pretty cool. But since you brought it up, Jeff, do you think that at some point, this came up too, that local broadcasters will be able to say, hey, if Pluto, if you want to carry our broadcast, you got to pay us. That there will be sort of somebody to pay the equivalent of retrans fees at some point.
And I think it depends on, right now, Cox Media Group's a subscription business and an advertising business, about 50-50 on the revenue side. So if we're doing business with somebody who's in the subscription business as well, right, like a Netflix, that does eventually want to carry local news or very local news, I think that there is room for that conversation. At this point, as broadcasters, which is your first charge from the FCC to make content available free, we broadcast to as many different people and as many different distribution streams as we can find. I expect, like everyone, that there'll be some consolidation in this space, and at one point there'll be people who have a financial interest in a subscription and want your content, and at that point that becomes a retrans.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Anyone else have a thought on the possibility of new retrans? So this next thing I wanted to ask, I'll throw it up to you, Jonathan, is you've got these sort of new streaming-only local competitors, if you will, like services like Local Now and Haystack and whatnot. How much of a threat are they to local broadcasters? Or do they not, as somebody was saying, have those relationships yet that that allow you to sort of bring in the advertising and even connect with the community?
I think the more opportunities for advertisers, the better, right? The more solutions that can be dynamic and customized to them is going to be better. I think that it's only going to add and contribute to an already kind of convoluted marketplace. It's very confusing. It lacks standardization, and I think that the more that we have involved with it, the more eyeballs that we have on it, I think the better it's going to be from a standardized, a better product for advertisers that are paying for some of these different competitors in some of these local marketplaces. So yeah, they might not be popular right now, but eventually, over time, with the continued growth of streaming and connected TV, it's only just going to provide more solutions that are going to be at the betterment of local sales teams as well as local advertisers.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. When we haven't really spoken about the advertising piece of this.
That's we're going to transition to it, but yeah.
So it's how do you scale? The advertiser still needs to reach their consumers locally. And with the fragmentation, with all this being completely the wild, wild west, how are we solving for that as an industry? And how are we unifying? How are we looking at audiences? So I think we're going to head there, but it's a really important point I think for us to discuss, because the distribution is one piece, but how do we meet advertisers' needs? Because whether it's retrans or ad-supported, something needs to pay for that content, that curation, and that technology.
Okay, well, this is a good transition, so I'll throw it at you. So, right now, a lot of, and basically what a lot of you on stage are doing is, streaming is being viewed as a reach extension vehicle for local TV. Now, how long, at what point does that swap? At what point is broadcast the reach extension vehicle for streaming on local? And how much does this sort of ability to geo-target and really, dive in, affect all of that? So Keith, I'll throw it back at you.
No, so it's a really important point, and it's behavior change. And yes, when does that flip? Don't know. I don't have the crystal ball. I don't think any of us do. I don't think they're in the room, but we use and partner with iSpot. This year I think we'll measure 3 to 4 billion impressions with 1,700 advertisers across broadcast in streaming to see how that incrementality actually delivers, and then couple that with attribution to show that value. That's the behavior to prove that streaming works. You can aggregate it, and you can engage with that consumer to do a business outcome that's positive to ROAS. The next step is, how does that consumer behavior challenge that model in the long term? And that's all about that measurement, which is the beauty of that streaming piece and now that convergent measurement that's in market.
Gotcha. Peter, that's your business too, so yeah.
Sorry, excuse me. Definitely agree with Keith. And it's, when you're looking at measuring these campaigns, I can remember, if anyone remembers Alfonso from a few years ago before they got acquired by LG. We could see basically unduplicated reach was 15%. You had, you're reaching a whole new audience with streaming. And there are some markets where if you look at kind of like the old school Venn diagrams that everyone used to see in high school, the broadcast circle used to be a lot bigger than the streaming circle. Well, now that streaming circle is catching up to that broadcast circle and almost reaching a similar audience.
Right. Aaron, what are you seeing there?
I think a lot of it comes back to your local sellers and making sure that they understand what they're selling and the conversations that they're having with their clients. And, we're all selling relatively the same thing. And so it comes down to that consultative nature that our sellers have. And how are we training them to still have those good business conversations and talk about the expectations of what these products will do when we implement them? Because I think there's a lot of confusion for that as well. If they go out and promise the world, they're going to lose the client right away. If they understand what these products mean to them, then they understand what it means to the businesses that they're helping. They can set up the KPIs properly on the front end. And so, it comes back to your sales force and making sure that they are equipped to have these conversations and that we're simplifying it for them too. If we're all confused about this, they're definitely confused about it. And our advertisers in a lot of ways are coming to us, with more sophisticated terminology than the sellers. And so, making them comfortable in this space is really what keeps kind of propelling things forward.
I was going to say, this kind of reminds me of back in like 2010, 2011, when we were trying to sell display ads to local advertisers. You'd ask them, like, listen, how are you getting your news? And they're like, well, we're getting our news online now, right? Well, where are you placing your ad dollars? We're still buying our ads in the newspapers, right? I think that there's this kind of educational piece that's kind of the advertisers are looking for that education, and it is such a Wild West. They're being sold technically the same thing, but being bundled up and packaged in different verbiage in different ways. It's confusing, right? So I think that once we equip local sellers with the ability to have a standardized way of going about approaching and defining what CTV, OTT, and what streaming is, and building KPIs and putting guardrails around expectations, once we get to that point, I think that's when we're going to hit that kind of that watershed moment where broadcast is almost going to be that reach extension on top of streaming right now. But
yeah, Jeff?
I think Aaron made a great point about the advertiser maybe a little ahead of the advertising sales force in this instance. They are well trained on the large tech platforms that are largely self-service out of Meta and Alphabet. And those platforms are very accessible, have a very low cost of entry, and a very direct performance orientation return. That's something that we'll need to mimic as we get going. At the end of the day, when we think about streaming as a distribution platform, we have to remember that geography and the direct IP connection has a value somewhere around 2x the linear CPM. So there's a good amount of value to capture out there.
Right. No, it's interesting. When they come from digital, I'll throw this back at you. One of the things we've also heard that a lot of the people who are very versed in digital and even the people selling it don't necessarily get that the TV commercials have emotions attached to them. In other words, that they're funny, they're sad, they're poignant, whatever, whereas display ads don't. and that it's sort of, and that's sort of this benefit of TV, and that it's sort of like this X factor, someone had called it, where like it's, that sort of makes TV more valuable. Like, are you finding that some of those clients are getting that piece?
Oh, absolutely. This is sight, sound, and motion. This is the ability to have a television experience at a very relatively low out-of-pocket investment. So if in Atlanta, if you want to advertise on WSB, our station, it's the leading station in Atlanta, has been for 50 years. Your minimum order size there is about $5,000. If you want to advertise on neighborhood TV in Atlanta, it's about $1,500. In fact, we'll take a $1,000 order. It's, we'll make it work. But the reality is we're extending the brand into the market with really local television that has a premium value because it's on a CTV, and I know exactly which household it's going to, and it has complementary reach to the existing station that's there.
Right. So I want to talk too about frequency capping, which is a big issue that comes up with streaming all the time. To use my really funny left-handed juggler joke from before, a lot of times you just don't have, you don't have the audience on streaming. That was the initial reason. You didn't have the audience. So if you were part of that target, everybody was selling it to you. And the other piece, of course, is that unlike regular TV, you've got all these sort of ad tech companies, whether it's Beachfront or Trade Desk or Magnite selling it, and they don't talk to each other, and so it all shows up. So Keith, what's being done to sort of make that better? Like, what innovations have you seen? Because everybody's aware it's a problem.
So again, this is Wild Wild West, and I'll talk just from our experience and how we approach it. Programmatic, in a lot of ways, is not the smartest technology, and that's where you see a lot of the frequency issues. We've approached unification of local content between the OEMs, VMPDs, a lot of local news partners in the most premium streaming services, and we have direct connections within that ad server. So we can balance competitive separation, frequency, recency for national advertisers that are buying those premium services and then utilizing us or another service locally. And we do this similar for our local partners. So it's approaching it with the right technology solution to understand that good user experience. Because at the end of the day, as we're delivering advertising revenue, if you are going to piss off that audience, they're going to go somewhere else because there's too many choices. So that's something that we do look at very carefully every day, what we bring to market.
And the only thing I'll add is it's changing the behavior of what the advertisers are buying. I mean, this is an audience-based buy. This is not a content-based buy. So everyone wants to be in live sports, or everyone wants to be in whatever their flavor of the week is. But if you're completely agnostic to where that audience is, you see better scale. So that will help you with your frequency issues. We're also looking at how can we measure frequency and see where is that optimal frequency to drive the right outcome from the campaign. So I think we're actually in a pretty good position in the streaming space to help advertisers actually take advantage of frequency.
Yeah, this could get fun. I actually disagree with you on that one.
Okay.
Good. I do think it's the combination of audience, geo, and context. As you look at local marketplace, news and sports, they are the drivers. And when you look at that engagement on the broadcast side, that's where that local community comes into play. As football season, NBA, NHL, MLB, it's how do you scale that locally? And that's unifying all the different distribution points. That content matters. A lot of times from a creative standpoint, advertisers are creating specific content to run in that sports or news environment. So I think solving for that is really important to get that engagement and that consumer impact.
I definitely agree that this, yes, sports is great, and so is the news. We just can't get scale sometimes. So that's when we might run into frequency issues.
Right. Aaron, how are you guys looking at frequency?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a balancing act with the technology. You've got to put all of the guardrails in place that you can, that you've got accessible to you. I think that the diversity of the advertisers has gotten better too, so that helps it.
Yes, that's huge, yeah.
I was just going to say, the last thing you want to do is develop ad fatigue where you're just kind of pounding people beating them over the head with the same ad over and over again. It's going to have the adverse effect that you want to try to achieve as an advertiser. But I think in certain circumstances, I think that every, execution, ad ops approach should have some type of frequency cap in place. but there is a balance, especially if it is a different type of product. Maybe it's a longer sales cycle. You might want to lift whatever those frequency caps are. So honestly, yeah, each campaign is going to be different. Frequency is going to be a little bit different. Leveraging the technology that you have available to you to be able to kind of control that, but looking to see what the analytics is telling you. Maybe, typically frequency caps are 4, times per day per device at the same IP. But maybe we're seeing better results by increasing that frequency by X amount, right? So I think that's a big part of it, but certain challenges like scale, tight knit geos, overlaying audiences and whatnot. So all these things have to be taken into consideration in order to mitigate some of the challenges that frequency and scale have.
Okay. And Jeff?
If I see that Jardiance commercial one more time. Some of this is just a consequence of sort of the development of FAST. I mean, it's your fault. You named it. This wasn't here as a platform 3 years ago, and now it's a very easy access platform that's doing very, very well. The same thing happened when cable achieved parity with network. All of a sudden, you'd turn on, Turner Classic Movie or Turner Movie Channel, and you'd watch P&G ads for the next 4 hours, and it would be exhausting. Yeah. I think things adjust. I think both Keith and Peter are right that you're going to see both advertisers adjust what they put on the air, and you're going to see technology come to kind of reduce that effort. But in the meantime, we're going to listen to it a lot. So.
Okay. Well, we have about 5 minutes left. I want to open it up to see if anybody has any questions for our esteemed panel here. I know it's getting late, but if anybody wants to be brave. Carol.
I didn't hear anybody talk about privacy or any kind of data governance issues that might arise in IP address collection and delivery.
Anybody want to talk about IP? Anybody want to take that on? I mean, or I could just hit you up with, what do you think of IPv6? Do you even know what it is? No.
For measurement purposes, or just for or delivery, or?
Delivery, measurement, consumer reaction. I'm just curious if it's coming into your ecosystem about how you're trying to get local and how streaming and how you're collecting that data and making those.
Yeah, we actually haven't come across that as an issue. I hope you just didn't open up Pandora's box. But from geo-targeting that's been in market for years and going down to that very specific zip or kind of cluster of zip codes, we haven't heard that. And I think as you and I have talked in the past, safe havens and being PII compliant has been something that the industry's been really good about for a long time.
And I think depending on the consumer, and this might be a little scary, it's almost like Big Brother watching. Does anyone know what Telly is? Telly, free Telly?
Yes.
Okay, so people are signing up and volunteering to give their information and be watched and given all the data to this company so they can then receive ads that are being delivered back to them. So I think it's almost kind of, it's definitely a fine line of, are we volunteering more information because we want a free TV, and then we also want ads that are more relevant to us. But the PII is still protected, though. Sorry,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I would say that's not a representative sample.
No, it's absolutely not. It's a very small sample, but it's a disruptor in the space, just like Pluto 4 years ago was a disruptor in the space offering free cable. So I'll let you know in 12 to 24 months.
Okay. Hugh.
I think there's a fair I think there's a delicate balance of how much information you give them to, you don't want to overload them and confuse them with it. So again, we're bringing it back to basics and simplifying these things for them. Have a really good business conversation, ask the right questions, come back, and we can have a discussion about the right tools. And then you're getting that competitive information from the client when you're in front of them, so they don't have to dispute that right there. You know, that happens later on in the pitch, but you know, they're not necessarily going in there kind of worrying about all of those other pieces. And that really helps, because I think the more they are focused on the competitors, the more they're focused on the tools that they've got, you know, the less they're able to really listen to what the client's asking for and approach these things like a consumer. We are all consumers, and so the more that we do that, I think those are the successful salespeople in our business right now that are just simplifying it as if they were the ones that were going to buy from that business.
And I'll add to that. I mean, now, you know, to Aaron's point, I mean, they have more weapons now. They have more tools in the shed that they can offer the client, where before, if you were just selling your network, well, then you were competing with the cable company. Well, now they can offer something that is similar to what the cable company is offering. And then, obviously, I think, you know, back to, you know, the North Star is always going to be the client. Put together the right solution that's going to meet the objective of their needs.
We guys.
I was just saying that products like Compulse
Yeah, I was
are
gonna say,
incredibly helpful for reps. But I had lunch with a salesperson today next door, and it doesn't work for Cox, so I can't tell you who it is.
Jonathan
But,
just slipped him
the,
$20 under the
but
table. You missed it.
The thing that was overwhelmingly clear to me in speaking to this person, and I guess he's one of your superstars or whatever they're called, was it wasn't so much that he knows what his products are. It's that that person knows his customers' products, and that person knows his customer's business, and that person's passionate about their customer's business and has a positive relationship with them. If you can do that, and you're not sure whether you call it OTT or CTV or call it FAST or call it something else, it probably doesn't matter, because that customer is going to buy from you. This was a guy who used the example of the roofing business. He's like, I'm an expert on GAF. I know everything about panels. That's the person you're going to spend your money with. You don't really, you know, care exactly where it goes or how many impressions are or what the value is. He's going to move your business, and he's going to succeed because he likes you and what you're doing. That's the secret since 1950 or so when we got on the business.
On that note, which is perfect, we have the closest I've ever gotten to ending a panel exactly on time. We're like